Thank you, Richard. That was beautiful. I got to tell you, anything having to do with the Beatles is beautiful to me. I love the Beatles. So, good morning and welcome to our One Heart, One Mind Center for Spiritual Living online Sunday service. And this morning, we're continuing with November's theme, which is living as compassionate conduits. I'm hoping you can't hear my dog barking in the background. Compassion is one of the many qualities that we attribute to our Creator, whatever name we call that, presence, God, Spirit, the divine, along with many other qualities that are relatives of love and compassion. And this theme, I think, acknowledges our human capacity to be living expressions of our source, of this creative energy, life, I like to just call it. And it speaks to our inherent ability to embody and express all of these qualities of the divine presence that are within us and all around us, in and through, and as all life. You know, in our Science of Mind teaching, we have an affirmative statement that we use. Well, we have many, but this one is one that we say often. I think it recognizes our ability to express the divine life in our human lives through our words and our actions. And sometimes I even use this affirmation or statement as a mantra or a chant during my spiritual practice time in the morning. Sometimes I'll take out my mala beads and say this over and over. And I'm sure you've used it yourself. And I'm going to share it so we can look at it. Hang on a second. Got to get it up. Okay. I'm sure you know it. And it is, there is only one life. That life is God's life. That life is perfect. That life is my life now. And we say this often, at least I know I do, because it brings me into that place of connection, knowing that there is only one life, and that life is absolutely perfect. Nothing is missing from it. Everything that I need is already available to me, and that life is my life now. Let's stop my share there. And so I looked, I wasn't actually sure where in the Science of Mind this quote came from. So I looked it up, and I found that it's on page 292 of the Science of Mind text. And our founder, Ernest Holmes, wrote this on that page. He said, there is only one life, and that life is God. We must complete, oh, wait a minute, I left out a line, sorry. It is not enough, he wrote, to say there is one life and that life is God. We must complete this statement by saying that life is my life now, because we must couple this life with ours in order to express it. We are not becoming this life, but are now in and of this life. There is no other life. There is no other life. God's life is our life now, you know, and the divine expresses itself in and through its creation 100% of the time. You know, I've said in a few previous Sunday messages over the last few weeks that God, Spirit, whatever name we feel comfortable with, is the self-givingness of life to itself. Because we're one with our Creator, and we're one with all of its creation. And this Creator gives to itself by giving to us, because we're one. And everything is always available to us within this oneness and this connection with our Creator. But here is the big but with that statement and with this affirmation that I love so much. As individual expressions of this one divine life, we share its nature to be free. Free to choose, free to put our attention where we want to put our attention. We have the ability to be more engaged or less engaged with this life, this thing that we're always connected to, even if we're not aware of. We can choose how much or how little we want to receive from this presence. Now, we can't actually be separate from life. We wouldn't be here. But we can believe or perceive that we can be separate from it. We can make ourselves available or cut ourselves off from this presence. We can do that. And as human beings, I can speak for myself here, we have this uncanny ability to compartmentalize our lives into situations, events, and activities that we define as not spiritual, and ones that we define as spiritual. We tend to divide our lives into things that are these secular areas, just dealing with the business of our physical world, like our jobs or our finances or our work world, things that take that logical and analytical mind approach. And then there are things that we deem spiritual, more intangible things that require emotion and feeling, that deal with the mysteries of life. What happens after we die? Is there something else? Those kinds of things. And things that we deal with when we're dealing with relationships and love and family and friends and ideals. Those things we can deem spiritual. And love, for example, and we can't hang on to that. It feels like this essence of something beyond ourselves. And here's the truth. The truth is that whether or not we're aware of it, everything is spiritual. Everything has its origin in spirit. Everything has a cause in divine mind, no matter how we choose to view it. We're spiritual beings. It's who we are. And our creator and everything within the divine mind is always 100% available to us 100% of the time. And this presence wants to express itself through our words, through our actions, and through our hearts as we love and allow ourselves to be loved. There is only one life, and we are always and constantly a part of it. There have certainly been times in my life when I've felt less engaged with this connection to the one life. Times when I've felt separate from anything larger than my individual point of view and expression and experience. Most of us have probably had times when we felt apart from our creator, apart from the larger life, apart from the flow of life, cut off from our source. But you may have noticed that when we decide to reconnect with this power and presence that's always within us, it's always there, just as available as it always has been. 100% available and ready to flow through our lives to the degree that we choose to allow it, as little or as much as we believe we can receive. Remember that little line about you can go to the ocean of consciousness, the ocean of good, and fill up a thimble, or you can fill up a dump truck. It depends on what we decide we're willing to accept. And I also love the analogy of the radio dial, that I can choose to tune my dial to receive the frequency of spirit, because spirit is always transmitting to me. But my radio station or my dial on my radio may not always be tuned into that frequency. So I have to tune in. And that we can certainly learn to do that if we're not familiar with how to tune into that. That is a skill that we can develop through the spiritual tools that we teach. And as I was putting together my message for this week, I kept thinking about that old story about the, let's see, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget it. I think I know it by heart, though. There's an old story about a king who he placed a big boulder in the middle of a well-traveled road. And then he hid to watch and to see if anybody would take the time to stop and to remove the boulder from the middle of the road. And some of the wealthiest and upper class members of the community came by and simply walked around the boulder. And many people complained loudly about how the king was not keeping the roads clear. But nobody did anything about it to get the boulder out of the way, until a peasant came along carrying a load of vegetables, and he saw this big boulder in the middle of the road, and he laid down his load of vegetables and he tried to move the boulder to the side of the road. And after much pushing and straining and effort, he finally was able to move it over to the side. And then when he went back to pick up his load of vegetables again, he noticed that there was a purse laying in the road right where the boulder had been. And the purse contained many different gold coins and a note from the king saying that this gold was for the person who finally removed the boulder from the roadway. So the moral of the story for us is that every obstacle has within it an opportunity for us to grow and to improve and to expand and to course correct and to move into a greater connection with that is always flowing through us. Every challenge, and I mean this sincerely, every single challenge has a gift hidden in it somewhere, even if it's difficult for us to see when we're all wound up in the challenge. And when I think about the challenges that we humans face in life, it seems like most of us are pretty good at dealing with the great big challenges, the big boulders that are right there in the middle of our road. But and I don't want to trivialize these big boulders because they are difficult. I mean, a lot of us have had these big boulders cause us a lot of pain and discomfort and suffering, and they do. But we seem to be pretty good at being able to move through those big boulder challenges for the most part. Our large losses, our grief and our hardships. We usually feel much more comfortable asking for help with the big boulders. We usually feel more willing to accept help from others with the boulders, to accept help from our friends and our family, from practitioners and from ministers and caregivers. And again, not to trivialize these big boulders, that sometimes it takes a while to move through a divorce, a loss of a loved one, the loss of a job. But it seems to me that it is not so much the boulders that trip us up, but the little pebbles, these everyday pebbles that get in our way on our path, those little annoyances, the small things that seem to get in the way. And here, in my humble opinion, is where I really think our work is done. Here in our daily lives, here's where the real gifts are given. This is the practice. I think about it like this. It's the small things that we encounter in life that give us the opportunity to see how empowered we are to create from that place of peace and comfort within ourselves, and not to allow the outside world to dictate to us how we feel. Ever do that? I do it all the time. But we are empowered to develop the ability to respond from our connection to the divine within us, rather than to react with annoyance that the world around us is not behaving the way we think it should behave. Do you know exactly what I mean? It's those small things that I think are the real lessons for us. Am I letting the guy who cut me off on the freeway move me out of my state of peace and comfort? Am I allowing the things in the world around me to have power over me? Or am I functioning and living and being driven by my connection to source in each and every moment? The science of mind teaches that the creative process, which we all know, which begins with our thoughts and our feelings and our beliefs and is activated and moves through us with the action of natural creative law. And then it becomes the experiences we have in our life. This process is always working for everyone, whether we're aware of it or not. And the creative process uses the beliefs we have internalized through our childhood, from our culture, and from our personal experiences. And many of these, often unconscious beliefs, are created from things that we have not completely processed or worked through. Are you with me here? Those things that get stuck in us that we don't want to feel, so we just push them aside, blame somebody else, pretend they aren't happening. And these are the things that still need to be brought out into the life of love. And I believe, it is my personal opinion, that it is the little small annoyances that are a peek into the things within us that still need to be healed. Why is this bothering me? You know, often when I get into an argument with my husband, I realize that it is not ever about the thing we're arguing about. Rarely is it, which is usually some inconsequential thing, but something deeper that I haven't cleaned up, that I haven't brought into the light of truth. So I believe that when we deal with the daily annoyances, the pebbles of life as they come up, we learn to make ourselves 100% available to the flow of life, to the flow of the divine moving through us. And when we allow ourselves to meet life as it is without resistance, to feel how we feel in that moment and not to stuff or deny our feelings, we practice living from that place of deep connection rather than resisting everything that comes along that we don't like. You know, we can begin to stop thinking that life has to be a certain way for us to be happy. This is the only option for me. If life doesn't show up this way, then I'm just not going to be happy. Yeah. The pebbles give us the wonderful opportunity to self-reflect and course correct. They give us the opportunity to ask questions about why we feel how we feel, and an opportunity to tell ourselves the truth of what is behind any negative thought and the feeling that we are experiencing in that moment. You know, and this idea of self-reflection is certainly not a new idea. The Catholic Church has been doing it for centuries. Confession is a way of taking stock of how we react and how we behave the way we react and behave. You know, I don't know that it has always been taught to be used in that way, but it certainly gives us an opportunity to reflect on why we respond to things in our lives, and to see how we can change our experience of what is by changing our inner world so that it will be reflected in our outer world. You know, I have to admit, I can still see that illustration in my Baltimore catechism when I was growing up, of two pictures of souls. And the first picture is a picture of a soul with all these black dots. And these are the sins. We would call them error thinking. And then after confession, when the soul is nice and clean and nothing's in there. And as metaphysicians, we can look at this as the way we transform our error thinking into thinking that is in alignment with that is already within us, that source that is available to us 100% of the time. You know, we certainly have had a really big dose of opportunity to reflect on how we respond to our outside world this year. You know, with our experience of this COVID pandemic, and as with our experience of a presidential election in the middle of a COVID pandemic. You know, these have certainly been challenging times, and there have certainly been times when I am tired of not being able to go to a restaurant or not being able to go do something when I want to do it. And then I remember, my freedom is not something that only comes from my outside world, but it's something that I experience within myself. I have read stories of people, well, Nelson Mandela comes to mind, who were free inside a prison. We can be free wherever we want. We can be joyous wherever we are. Resistance is futile, as they say on Star Trek. Which to me simply means that when I resist what is, when I put up a wall to experience what is right in front of me, I only make myself miserable. Now, I'm not saying that what is can't be changed. Of course it can. Through our creative nature, we're empowered to create something new. But until we get right with ourselves, our internal world, we're not going to see what is right on the outside, in the outside world. You know, and also another thing I was thinking about with this idea of confession is in the 12-step tradition of addiction recovery, the 10th step, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget. Let me see if I can find it. The 10th step is, you know, here it is, I found it. The 10th step is another great tool, you know, and it invites the participants to live in the flow of life by taking a daily inventory. The 10th step reads, continue to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. Oh, admit we're wrong. That is not something that we do easily. But you know what? This kind of diligent self-reflection calls us to maintain a certain level of integrity, to live from the principles and the values that we say we believe in. And it shows us where we've grown and where we've made progress in our life. It asks us to reflect on how we've dealt with the pebbles in our life, in our dailiness. How did I respond? Did I act in a kind way? Was I loving to myself? Was I loving to others? What would I do differently? You know, Joe Dispenza has a meditation that we do, that I do sometimes in the evening, and it invites us to reflect on what we've done. And one of the most important things I think the 10th step does is it helps us to minimize the buildup of those negative emotions that causes us to lash out at little things that are really not the reason we're lashing out in the first place. To put up that it calls us to look where we're putting up that resistance to what life is, and to how we are engaging with life. Am I allowing the flow of life to move through me? You know, it really asks us to look closely at why we feel the negative emotions that come up during our day, and they are going to come up. Feelings like resentment or jealousy or fear or anger or shame. Shame is a good one. Self-pity. Oh, boy, how many of us have had a pity party? And it invites us. It tells us that we must look at how we can move into a new way of thinking about these things, a new way of viewing them from the perspective of our wholeness, from the perspective of the source that's within us. So these kinds of self-reflective practices invite us to explore the idea, moment by moment, that there's something more behind the chatter of our conscious mind, that we can learn not to listen to every thought or idea that flows through our conscious mind. You probably heard that saying, don't believe everything you think. We don't have to believe everything that floats through us. So I'm going to invite you to play with me for a minute. I'm going to invite you to think of something in your life that bothers you in your external world. Whenever you encounter it, it could be anything, cranky or rude people, or somebody left the door open and the flies got in. I don't know. Your spouse left the cap off the toothpaste. Some pebble, some little pebble that you don't like to encounter. Think of something. Got it? And now for a moment, I don't want you to judge it or blame it. I just want you to see it. And now I want you to ask yourself, who is observing this thing that bothers you? Who is the observer of this pebble in your life? And from this vantage point of the observer, the witness to this pebble, are you willing to see it another way? Are you willing to see it through the eyes of compassion or love? Maybe this cranky person you encountered has a lot of emotional pain and they took it out on you. Or maybe that It's just not a big enough deal to disturb your peace. And as you shift the way you look at the pebble, can you feel yourself relax? Can you feel how you stop resisting and you open up to a greater flow of what could be? And now in this place of observer or the witness consciousness, we hear it called a lot, everything is available to you here. This is the place where deep inspiration, intuition, deep peace, compassion, beauty, and love resides. And it is always 100% available to us all the time. And we can decide, because we are free, just like our Creator, whether or not we want to be available to it. And I don't know about you, but sometimes I just want my conscious mind to be quiet. I just want to stop thinking about things I don't want to think about. Have you ever been there where, oh, stop, there's noise in my head? But I've discovered that creating a peaceful life isn't really about trying to control my mind. That's just crazy making. I am not going to stop the thousands and thousands of thoughts that I think every day that come and go and want to take up residence in my brain. But what it is more about is what thoughts I decide to engage with, which ones I decide to make welcome and to become available to. Which ones are the ones that are going to enhance my life? Which ones will bring me peace? And which do I simply want to acknowledge and let go? Which ones do I simply want to acknowledge and let roll right on through without resistance or fight? And that's the key. I don't need to resist anything. Acknowledge what is and let it go, and engage with the beautiful thoughts that I want to have. Now, trust me, I am not an expert in doing this. There are still things that catch me off guard and I start spinning and spinning about them. I bet you do too, because you're human. But I'm getting much better at letting things come and letting things go and not stuffing them or denying how I feel, but telling myself the truth about them from that larger perspective of the witness or observer self, which is my connection to spirit, which is my connection to the flow of life and to my soul. And last week I talked a little bit about how our breath is one of the best tools we have to get centered and to move us into that place of connection. You know, our breath, as soon as we start focusing on it, it moves us out of that high beta stress place, and our brain waves begin to calm down, and we move down into a more calm and connected state of consciousness. And as metaphysicians, we understand that everything is created from the inside out. So as I am calm and comfortable and more relaxed on the inside, it will begin to manifest on the outside. And while our tendency is to try to make our discomfort better by changing something in the outside world, that is only a temporary solution. You know, what's that saying, that metaphysical saying? Wherever you go, there you are. So you might as well take with you the peace and the calm that is already available right where you are. So when life catches us and we want to strike out or change something on the outside to relieve some discomfort we're feeling on the inside, what can we do to bring ourselves back to center? We can watch our breath. We can draw our focus to the inside. We can practice gratitude. Find something in any situation, event, or circumstance that you can be grateful for. It's always there, even if it is that you have your feet on the ground or the sky is blue. There is always something. We can practice forgiveness, which is simply a process of moving out of fear and into faith and a feeling of what it is we want to experience. We create that on the inside. And I also like to use, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, I like to use that affirmation. What's the affirmation? I forgive myself for making this situation, this person, this thing, the object of my discontent, or whatever it is. And we can use any kind of affirmation. Maybe it's just everything is working together for my good. Or as Morgan likes to say, everything always works out for me. Love that one. Or maybe we just say, life is on my side. Something that draws us back into the internal world so that we can see it reflected in the external, in the outside word, outernal. I just coined a new word. So whatever practice you decide to use during your day, I invite you to keep it very simple. Make it something that you can do easily, whatever, wherever, whenever you happen to be. I was listening to this YouTube video with Tony Robbins the other day, and he said something. What was it? He said, I don't want to get it wrong. It was pretty cool. He said, the enemy of execution is complexity. I just love that. The enemy of execution is complexity. And he's right. If something is too complicated, I am not going to do it or use it when I need it. So we keep our spiritual practices simple and accessible so that we have them there at the ready when we need them. We have to each find our own spiritual tool or practice that works for us, but we keep it simple and accessible so that we can pull our consciousness back to that place where we stand in the flow of what is always 100% available to us. And we open ourselves to be 100% available. It is our choice. It is our gift. It is our freedom. Let us pray. So I'm going to take a nice deep centering breath and come into the presence of that witness, that observer state of consciousness. I'm going to watch my breath draw me into a deeper connection with that place that is always within me. It is the peace, the calm, the love, the power, the presence of life. And I am, and all people on this call and people on this planet, all life is in connection with that one life, that one wonderful, all-encompassing, beautiful. So I speak my word forward about each and every person that is present on this virtual Sunday service, and each and every person who is not, all people in our community, all people on in our country, all people on the face of the mother herself. And I know for them a shift in consciousness that allows the full flow of the generosity of spirit giving to itself, to accept and know the power of love, the power of good, the power of creative energy that is moving in and through and as us and is available to us in every moment. That we are cracked open and flow with this loving power and presence in a way that we have never known before, in a way that is simple and accessible and effective to enhance not only our life, the life that we are one with, the life of all creation on our beautiful Mother Earth. So I just give great thanks for this, and that gratitude moves me into that deeper state of receivership in which I simply say yes. And I release this prayer into the capable and constant hands of law that always says yes. It has no choice. So I just relax, and for this and so much more, I simply say thank you, allow it to be, and we signify our agreement by saying together, and so it is. Woohoo! Okay, I'm buzzing. All right, you beautiful people. This is our time for conscious giving. And I want to express my gratitude to all of you that continue to give to our center during this time of online services and COVID. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. Hang on for just, well, I can't seem to stop it. There it is.